Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Tommy. How are you doing?
Good morning, Mike. Hi, it's a great Thursday. This week is blowing by.
I like how you changed your sentence mid-sentence there. Hi, how you? And then changed right halfway through.
I just realized how late in the week it already was.
We are almost at Friday already. Things are going crazy. A lot of things are happening. It's very exciting right now. I'm extremely busy myself. Lots of software development happening. So yeah, very excited for this month. It's been going very fast. I can't believe it's already like mid-March almost. Like, where did the time go? February just zoomed by for me. I don't know if anyone else is feeling the same way.
I mean, the weather's already changed. I'm expecting a little more snow.
You say that now. You just jinxed it. Like that was your fault. Like I'm not sure that was a good idea, Tommy.
Am I the culprit in mid-March to be the reason why we're going to have... I'll take one more snow. Just one more cold night, because guess what? All the bugs are coming out. This is when it gets hot.
Yeah, I mean, true. I mean, I'm happy for the warmer weather, but I mean, it was just like 60 degrees up where we were, so it's crazy warm. Before we get into that, let's go and do our main introduction here. So we'll have a little bit of news here, but our main topic today, this is kind of a fun topic that we do. We do spend $100 on fabric. So this is kind of our exercise where we spend a little bit of time working through fabric. We kind of describe, what we would spend our efforts, or where we put more of our time or energy to develop things directly for fabric. All right, that's our topic for today. But our news, let's go through some news items. So I have a question for you, Tommy. My question's kind of around an experience that I didn't understand existed for Power Query. Okay, so Dataflows Gen 2. Okay, let me frame some things. Dataflows Gen 2, and inside Dataflows Gen 2, what is your normal workflow with Dataflows Gen 2? Just walk me through what your normal workflow is.
Yeah,
I'm looking for something very specific here, so I'm just trying not to give away the answer, but I'll also ask you a question.
I mean, really, there's only one sole purpose, and is pushing data in. Really, what I've been doing mostly now is, if I'm getting raw data from a notebook, there's some additional things I want to do for cleaning, structuring up. I just push data back into a table in either the Lakehouse or a SQL database in Fabric.
So at the end of your data flow, whatever you're doing, how often does it come out and get into like a table? Like what's the
every time. Yeah, it's okay. I barely use Dataflows Gen 1 now for like Power BI reporting. Everything right now is a data flow, and it's going to store the data in another service.
Okay, got it. All right, excellent. So that's kind of what I thought you were going to say. All right. Did you know when you make a data flow table, you can make a data flow table and you can walk away and come back to desktop, not load the data table to anything, but just make the data flow, and you can connect to it from desktop?
Well, that's Gen 1, right? That was the concept with Gen 1 data flows.
But where is the data stored? This is my question.
Okay.
All right. So for context here, in Gen 1, you would run the data flow, right? So I'd have a data flow to make it. The data flow would make a table. The data table would then be saved somewhere in CSV file somewhere. If you managed it, it would be in your storage account. If Microsoft managed it, it would be in their thing somewhere, right? So somewhere they're storing the data. I was on a call yesterday, and I had a client asking me like, hey, when I connect my data flow, it just works. I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? You don't like write it down to the lake and then pick it up from somewhere else? Like, no. I make a Dataflow Gen 2, I go into desktop, and I open desktop up and say, go to this workspace and connect to that Dataflow Gen 2 without writing the data anywhere. And what happened, desktop went up to the service, grabbed the M code, and immediately loaded the table in desktop for me. I didn't write it down anywhere. Did you know that was a feature? Yeah, your knitted eyebrows tells me. Your knitted eyebrows.
No, because I'm going through this.
Okay, so my typical workflow pattern, I'm with you, Tommy, right? Up until this point, every time I did a Dataflow Gen 2, I would run a Dataflow Gen 2, I would connect the data from SharePoint or Excel or whatever, where I'm getting the data from, the SQL Server, doesn't matter. And then I would, on the tables that are coming out of Dataflows Gen 2, I would connect them to like a lakehouse or a SQL Server, or I would write the data, I would make the data flow do something and push the data into an actual area. Well, I never have just made the data flow and didn't publish the data set anywhere, and instead just use Power BI Desktop to use the Dataflow Gen 2 to load the data or import the data. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Huh. Because I know Gen 1 data flows were technically stored in an Azure blob as CSV.
Mm-hmm.
So
you had to process them. It sounds like now they're processing them in real time. And like when you hit refresh on the semantic model, it goes back to Dataflows Gen 2, runs what it needs to run, and returns the data to you from the service to whatever semantic model you're doing. Yeah, I know. My mind was blown. I was like, I did not even know this feature existed. I've never attempted I never even attempted to go connect to Dataflows Gen 2 with desktop. And if I didn't know this, I'm like, who else didn't know this? So anyways, PSA, public announcement. You can make a Dataflow Gen 2, not push the data anywhere, and every table that is made in the Dataflow Gen 2, you can take desktop and you can go into the experience in desktop and you can connect directly to the data flow without writing the data down to any physical area. It just stays in the semantic model. Now, I don't know, again, I just discovered this yesterday. So I don't know if there's any performance implications of this. I don't know how, I don't know if anyone else is doing this. So this is also to the audience here. Anyone who's on the call or the live session here, does anybody else use this? Is anybody else directly connecting to a data flow? Or is everyone else trying to write the data down to somewhere? I was shocked. I was literally shocked. I was like, I didn't think this was going to work. I was actually questioning the customer and be like, no, that doesn't work. That's not a thing. And I was floored that when it did work just fine.
Question though, why wouldn't you just use the Gen 1 data flows if that's what you wanted to do, connect to Power BI? That's literally the same, in a sense, process, workload.
Okay. Good question. Great question around why wouldn't you just use Gen 1? I mean, to your point, Tommy, right? Yeah, you're right. Then why wouldn't you just use Gen 1? But Gen 1 doesn't support CI/CD, I don't think.
Well,
so I can't a deployment pipeline doesn't move Gen 1 between workspaces, right? So I think that's an unsupported item for that. And I believe a Dataflow Gen 2 is now either in preview or I think it was just recently announced somewhere that Dataflow Gen 2 is now storable in Git as well. So that's another kind of like one.
Yes, but with a gotcha, because I enabled it for one of my data flows. You have to create a new one. It doesn't work with pipelines. So with a data pipeline, you can refresh a data flow Gen 2, which obviously makes a lot of sense.
With a pipeline, you can refresh a data flow Gen 2, but you don't need to. What I just described tells you don't even need to refresh it. You just need to have it there. Right. I don't know.
Well, I'm saying in general, like if you had some workflow where you're pushing data from a notebook, then you wanted to refresh a notebook, or a data flow Gen 2, you could do that all in the pipeline. But if you enable Git, it doesn't see that artifact. So
let me ask a question. It doesn't see the artifact. You mean you can? So just to be clear, what you said, because I didn't understand exactly what you said. You said if it's in a pipeline, it will work. If you have a Dataflow Gen 2, you can call it from a pipeline, right?
Right.
It's just that the Dataflow Gen 2 can't be used in a deployment pipeline to go between environments.
Right. And if you create a Dataflow Gen 2 data flow and you enable the Git support, then the pipeline won't find it. You can't use any Git Gen 2 data flow.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird. But still, regardless, I see what you're saying though with the additional integration, because really the bare bones of what you're saying you're doing, connecting to a Power BI data flow in a semantic model, that was our lives with Gen 1. That's what we did.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Yeah. Anyways, just want to bring that point up because I didn't know that was a feature. Usually I'm pretty good about like working through workflows and like how things happen inside Power BI, but I was kind of shocked when I realized that there's no it just worked. Anyways, I was floored. Anyways, that was kind of interesting. All right, moving on. Let's do another news item here. I saw something come across my radar today. Are you familiar with the company named Lumel?
Lumel.
Lumel.
I
Have
don't.
you seen them?
I think I've seen the logo. I'm just looked it up, but can't say I've called them.
Okay. So Lumel is a company made by Gopal. Gopal is a really amazing owner and developer of a lot of like software and applications and things inside Power BI and the ecosystem. He's done some really amazing things. He's got, I believe he has EDI table or something like that. There's some custom visuals that his team has been building, and they've been building some pretty impressive things. Well, I just saw an announcement come across, and let me give you some context here, right? Lumel just announced. Are you a Microsoft Fabric user? Are you using no-code applications? Do you want to have write back to Fabric, Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift, and Azure SQL? These are all the things that we do. We like these things. Do you need it with enterprise security and governance? Introducing Power Table. So this is their pitch here for a Power Table private preview. It's actually out right now. So this is a write back table from Lumel. They're building a workload, and this is fun for me because I'm starting to see for the first time, I'm starting to see companies building workloads like for Power BI. This is a pure Power BI kind of like feature or something that came out of the Power BI world. We have, my company, we have released Power Designer. Everything has to come with the word power, apparently. That's just the way it goes. So we have Power Designer, and Power Designer it's basically our theme generator that we've brought over to Fabric. And so we are actively developing and pushing GA. We're going to go GA on our tool by Fabric Conference. That's the goal. That's our mission. So it's a big day for us. That's why we've been working so hard. We've got all the code done. We're really ready to go. And if you haven't checked out Power Designer inside Fabric as a workload, you should definitely go check it out because you can go try the full features of Power BI Theme Generator for free, all inside Fabric. So I'll put the link there as well down in here as well in the chat window, and I'll make sure I put it in the description for those who are listening online. But going back to Lumel's version here, they have a little short video talking about what their product is. It has to be done inside Fabric, so it is a Fabric-only workload. But this is kind of what we need. We want, like, Microsoft has built this really great ecosystem of like objects and Fabric and using all these different things. Well, now this Power Table is really interesting to me, and I'm very excited to see where this is going to go. I'd love to try it out inside a preview and see how this works with my Power BI data sources. This is the use case of, hey, I've got a team that's doing budgeting and they all need to enter numbers into a table. Mm-hmm. I need to edit lots of things. It needs to go to a table. So the idea here is like I have a table like potentially even in SQL Server, and I need to make multiple edits or changes all at once. This is the tool to kind of help you do rich table editing and get the data back to SQL or Lakehouse or something. And then what happens is you can then pull that forward into reporting. So this is a really interesting tool, and this is gonna be part of my, where Microsoft should invest money as well. That's part of my story. But that's another part of my story as well here. I'm gonna actually add that here as well. Anyways, just wanted to point that out. Tommy, do you do any? Let me pause right there for a minute. Tommy, do you do any write back? Do you have any write back projects?
The only ones that have been at Power Apps, there's always obviously the need for it. I don't have a lot of like custom development, but really everything I do is usually Power Apps.
Yeah. Okay.
So
just Power Apps is basically the thing that you do, right?
Yeah, and because that integrates really well with Power BI too, especially if I don't need to edit a record. Now, obviously, with Lakehouse is a little different, but just from a Power BI point of view, it's really been Power Apps, and then just kind of building some quick things that I can modify or add records to.
Okay. The reason, and another thing here I'll point out as well. So let me give you a little bit more context here as well, right? The reason I'm also interested in this feature, when I saw the post from this, I looked at the people who liked it, the people who were engaged with this. Let me give you some of the names here. Kurt Bueller was one of the people that liked it. Arun Yulang also liked it. Nicola Illick, Daniel O'Care, Um, so we're trying to find other famous names here in the Power BI community. I'm just scrolling through the list of names. There's a lot of people at the upper parts of Microsoft that are taking note, and very, I would say, influential people in the community around this workload. So, I mean, people are taking notice, and either, Gopal's been working with them or helping them along or doing things with them. But apparently, there's other like really big leaders in the community that are actually pushing this tool or are going to be very excited about it. So I'm very excited to see where this is going to go. I'm very happy that other development companies, are doing what I feel like is really powerful. The workloads is going to be quite amazing, I think, for companies, because it really gives you control about things you can build in Fabric. Anyways, very excited about it. Want to point that out. Go check it out. Go look at the little preview video. If you want to preview Lumel's Power Table, there is a fill out form. You can go fill that out and go preview it. Excellent. I don't have any other really news announcements, Tommy. Do you have anything else that you would kind of like?
I'm hoping to see more of a video but with the Power Table, because he kind of took some of my budget as well. So
See?
yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Tommy, let's go to our main topic today. So, if you don't have do you have any other news or articles, things you want to talk about?
Dude, I'm ready to dive in.
Okay, let's go. So let's jump into the main topic today. So, Tommy, phrase this out. Like, this is something that we typically do, like around, like sometimes it's like around Christmas. We do like wish lists and things like that. But like, what is it? This is kind of a game to some degree, right? Describe the game so people know like what we're doing here.
So I've done this a few times, but really the exercise today is congratulations. You are now a rune for the day.
Mm-hmm. Hello, I'm Arun.
Yes, hello, Arun. Welcome. Yes.
For those who are new to our community, who is Arun? What responsibility does he have?
Arun is the one who's responsible for everything that is Fabric.
He does it all.
He does it all. Does it all. So he oversees
corporate vice president of like all data, right?
Mm-hmm. All data at Microsoft. So not
Microsoft.
Just yeah. So obviously controls the whole Fabric platform, and expands more than that. Obviously, I'm sure his major focus has been Fabric lately. So, but he's basically got the budget. He's got the say. He's the czar, so to speak. So you're a rune for the day, and Microsoft executives and the finance team, well, they've given you for the next year $100 to spend on anything for Fabric. So this is a budget. So it's not just yours to spend for everything new. So our exercise is, how would you divvy up that $100 based on your own needs, where you think the product is going, what the product needs to invest in? Obviously, the more money you spend, the more importance or priority that you'd want to give that. Few things to keep in mind too. Obviously, we can always say new products, but again, if you're a rune, it's not just about what do you want to integrate, but it's also making sure that things are working well. What are the things that we find, since we're in it every day, that would be a better process or be just a better experience? Because obviously your goal is to get as many companies as possible to adopt Fabric.
I agree. And I'm going to probably come out. I mean, this is kind of like a fun way of just kind of saying, what is our wish list of things that we wish we could see around Fabric or Power BI? And this could be kind of like anything you want creative wise. I think I've got a couple good list items. So the idea here is you're in charge of the budget. You're in charge of what money is going to go where, and you're going to start allocating it to various features of the platform to make it most useful to people to use the platform. So that's going to be kind of our goal here. Tommy, do you want to kick us off with your first kind of item here, your budget? Do we need to go from like most expensive down to least expensive, or least expensive to most? Like, do you care?
As long as, which one do you want to do? I'll let you drive that. So I obviously have it sorted a certain way, but do you want to hear the heavy hitters right off the bat?
I'm probably going to take I'm going to take one heavy hitter at the beginning, and then I'll probably like ramp up in price from there. But I mean, to be perfectly honest and clear, what did I do to make this a reality? I immediately went to Excel, made a table, and started writing everything down. So I have everything I can sort it however we want. So you just tell me what you want, Tommy, and I can sort it my answers and however you need.
All right, I'm going to start with a teaser. I'm not going to start with
go with an easy one first.
So, and really, what I'm going to focus on, if I'm my room, I get my coffee, and we're saying, hey, we're focusing on our API support. I need better resources around our API documentation and fully integration. We have so many different products that are coming
Hmm,
from
interesting.
other, other backgrounds, other technologies such as Synapse and Data Factory, and everything else in between. That a lot of some of the code is C sharp. Some of this is really hard to authenticate to. What we want to do with our API is make it as easy as possible for users not just to get a list of records from something, but also to be able to.
Hmm.
I can work on a notebook outside of the Fabric browser. I have that access to do that. There's all these amazing things that we could do, but we need to be easier to find and easier to use. And I'm
Interesting.
putting $20 on that.
Whoa, you really like
Yeah.
APIs.
I
Wow,
think
you
it's
you
just a major
realize
feature.
you realize that much money spent on the pro, the professional, the developer. That just
Mhm.
means that's money you can't throw towards like Power BI or Data
Uh,
Factory or real time intelligence, Tommy. I mean, you're not going to put like at least half the money in real time intelligence and like data science. Like, no,
I'm adding a new column saying what persona is this for? Because I may be it may be very heavily in one way.
your
So
your whole experience is I'm giving all the money to the developers. They're going to be a developer experience only for everything. Oh, that's hilarious,
absolutely.
Tommy. All right. And I found, I mean, for this particular kind of episode, I found this actually extremely challenging because there's a lot of like little things that I'm like, wish I could talk about all the things. I don't want to have, I didn't want to have a massive list. There's a lot of things you could be building and developing here. So let me give you one that's just kind of not maybe it's an annoyance or just kind of hard to work with. So this is going to be a little bit of a weird item here, maybe. Um, when you use Spark, and again, I'm going to go, Tommy, I'm doing right what you're doing. I'm going to work on the professional developer. Like this is data engineering, pure and simple. So this is the data engineering persona. That's what I'm going to spend some money on here. So the reporting on Spark is good. It's definitely a lot better than it has been in the past. So we've done a really good investment so far. One of the things that I feel like I still can't get my hands around right now is when you run a Spark cluster, there's basically three things that you care about, at least that I cared about when I was running in Databricks. In Databricks, I would run a Spark cluster and I'd care about the network traffic, which usually wasn't an issue. But, when you look at the network traffic on a Spark cluster, that's usually telling you like when it's reading or writing data to and from disk. So, if you think about your job inside Spark, you need to go talk to the lakehouse, read in a bunch of data. Once the data is loaded, you
Mhm.
can then transform it in memory, and then you can write the data back down, or you're constantly shuffling data between the different workers. So that's where network traffic kind of comes from. So if you think about the mechanics of the system, right, you've got to load data in and you got to move data between machines potentially. And that's your network traffic, right? So potentially when you're, again, if I'm looking at a Spark cluster, that's one measurement I use is like, am I writing efficient code, right? If I only have a single cluster node and all the processing happens on that one machine and there's no network traffic between stuff, I know that it's working on one machine only. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Then the second thing is I focus on the memory of the machine. So when you pick a computer, a VM to run Spark, you pick a machine and there's a certain amount of, you 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64, whatever. You have different size memory machines. And some of them are on, like high speed or whatever, they've got, different memory allocations. So in Databricks, I could pick what kind of machine I wanted. I wanted a memory optimized or a compute optimized. So in my job, I would run my job, load this data, move these things around, do this transformation, read and write things, and I would watch the cluster and say, okay, how much memory am I using? And does the memory, like, do we run out of memory on a single machine? And then it forces me to spin up another machine and another machine to actually complete the job, right? So I like to watch this like time bound experience of like when do the machines turn on, how much memory is being used or how much compute is being used, because then I could kind of tweak my cluster towards memory optimized or compute optimized based on my job.
Okay.
I've been doing this Spark thing for quite a while, and what I learned was if you're using lots of small files, let's imagine you have a lot of tiny small JSON files that you're going to consume, right? You're going to load them into something. Small JSON files require a lot more compute than it does memory. And then the worker, the driver node, the one that's at the top orchestrating everything, it also needs to be larger compared to all the workers. So the driver is the machine that plans all the work. So if you've got 2 million little tiny files that are all JSON, the worker, the driver machine has to say, I need to read all 2 million files and figure out the plan of like, how are we gonna do the job to get everything done? And then once it's done, it starts allocating to the machines. Okay, here's what we need to do. Everyone, go do your jobs, plan out the work. Here you go. It logically, it makes a lot of sense, but I just have a hard time finding memory and compute optimizations inside Fabric. So that's one area that I can't see it. And so it really bothers me. So I'm going to give $10 to kind of like the Spark engine a little bit there around like Spark reporting. I'm also going to probably throw a little bit of money in this one. I'm going to give myself the world here because I'm a Rune. I can build whatever I want. So I'm also going to allocate some money of that $10. Part of that is around, let's decide on making more versions of Spark clusters. Because today, I think only thing I can pick is memory optimized, large and small, and maybe there's an extra small, something like that. I want more decisions. I want more machines to choose from, because I feel like I might be overpaying for some of my Spark clusters because the job I'm running might be more compute intensive, and I don't need as much memory. So I can't quite tell if my job is one way or the other because I don't have the reporting yet. So I need the reporting. And then I need a little bit more, more clusters. And, what if in the future, like I really would like to have a GPU cluster? Like, why can't I have one of those? So right now, I don't think there's an ability to go grab a GPU cluster either. So that would be something I would kind of like want to see, is to have more variety there, just for me, because I'm pretty technical in that space, and I just want to see more options to continue to tune.
Sure.
And this is less about like features that are missing. This is more about Michael trying to optimize and spend less compute units and really tune my jobs, because data engineering workloads, once you figure it out, it's very consistent. It just does the same thing every time, every day. So anyways, I'll just pause there.
So, I mean, I thought mine was a little developer based. Wow. So
yeah, I'm like, I'm just telling you, but it's only $10 though. So it's a $10. Like, I'm not spending $20 on it. Like, this is, yes.
Gosh, I feel bad for those people working on this. Here's all the things I want. A little bit of, but I mean, that makes a lot of sense too. You, unfortunately, though, you're still playing that Microsoft playground, so all the customization that you could want in the world, it's always going to be that little limited. Where it's not just an environment; it's really the whole configuration. Yeah,
I understand. Like, I understand what they're trying to do here. Like, they're trying to make it simple for you business users or people coming from the Power BI world. You have to admit though, like, who's using Fabric? Are data engineers coming over from other experiences to come to Fabric? No, they're not. Right? In the Microsoft's recent, I guess it was their earnings call, I think they said they have 30 million monthly active users in their sales call. That's a pretty good number. But those are the people that are coming, like, those are the ones that are exploring, like, what is Fabric? Are we going to use it? Like, that's the user base that you're talking to, because they're already inside Power BI already today, and they're seeing the messaging for Fabric. So to me, that's the user base. The user base is, hey, you are a Power BI user, and so that's why they're making this experience simple. They just need to do a better job of making this richer for that business user coming over to Spark.
Yeah. All right. So that's where you're starting. So
Your turn.
I'm going to go with something, and these are all things that we've talked about a ton, but I'm going to go with our lineage and really enhancing that, because I know they're already doing a push with Purview and kind of integrating that, but I'm like, no, this is essential. I've realized as a Rune how many artifacts are being created by my own team and the disorganization. And it's so hard to kind of see that workflow in just a table interface. So I'm going to put down $25 here. And we're really going to work on how everything actually, in a sense, touches or connects to each other.
Sure.
But also having an interface and something for users to see. Obviously, a ton of work on the back end, but really the end goal is for users to be able to quickly navigate, find what is actually getting pushed, not just, hey, this is downstream, but what data is getting pushed. So it can actually say, this is important, this is not important. So it's going to be a lot of metadata on top of just the artifact itself going into each of those. For example, a data frame from Notebook is pushing that data frame to, this particular lake house.
So you want lineage not only of the items themselves, but like, inside the item. So like Tommy, if you have a notebook that's pushing multiple like cells, right? So there's cells in a notebook. So if I had 3 cells and each cell is pushing to a different table in the lakehouse, you would see table by table lineage on that stuff as well.
Like, where did this column really come from?
Yeah. You're talking like column level lineage through the entire system, and there really is nothing today that does that. And it's not there's no passive way to do that. You'd have to kind of describe what you're doing to get that out. That's really hard. You have to even think about, like, if you're loading data using a notebook, that fundamentally changes like what you're doing in that notebook.
Well, if you think about it though, too, we already have the activity logs, and every time I write to a lake house, it's going to update a column, right? Every time I would add a record, or let's just talk like the lineage of a column. Every time notebook is going to write to a lake house table, it's going to modify that column. So that would be, in a sense, another record. But because everything is all, in a sense, seamless in Fabric, you're not really going outside of the Fabric environment.
Yeah.
And everything is already saying, hey, we're modifying these records. It would just have to be to find that central repository, because I think that's going to be a big part for especially the business users is, okay, I know that this data came from this Gen 2 and this shortcut and this notebook.
Yeah.
But how did we actually get this column? Like, what were the steps? In a sense, what was the journey? So that's where I was focused a ton.
Interesting that you note that. So one thing, let me just give you some context here from what I'm aware of. Like, Databricks does this. Databricks does column level lineage in their notebooks, but they do it if you just write a regular notebook and just say, this is the notebook, this is what I'm doing. Databricks doesn't do that the same way. You can't just write a notebook and just have it automatically grab the lineage. They use this thing called Delta Live tables, and the Delta Live tables is like a mix of streaming and or notebooks that help you produce. To your point, Tommy, like, I have this table, it's in bronze. I'm going to pick up that table in bronze and I'm going to move it over to silver, and it knows column by column. You define the SQL commands and then you write them out in a way that like lets you follow the lineage there. Maybe it's not down to the column level, but it's like at least by the table level. Mm-hmm. But like when you build a schema, so it almost sounds like you're describing, Tommy, like, I want to define the schema from raw data all the way into my reports. And if you define the schema, you can just say, okay, this is what I'm going to do along these steps. And then now Power BI can or Fabric can just trace the lineage of those things.
Okay. Exactly.
All right, that's good. How much are you spending on this one?
So like I said, I'm putting a pretty penny on this because it's the back end and also what that user interface is going to be. So I'm putting 25.
Whoa, you're spending a lot of money quickly here. Well, I may have too many items here on my list now. So I'm gonna leave the technical space here for a bit, and I'm gonna jump up. Are you good for me to go to my next?
I guess it's okay that you don't talk about developer things. So
I'm gonna try and pick one at least, right? So I'm gonna step back here. I'm gonna say, I think the Power BI community could use some love. The Power BI community, or even just the communities in general. I'm not seeing a lot of user groups. I'm not seeing a lot of activity on the Power BI community or the Fabric communities sites. I mean, Tommy, we run the Chicago one. I run the Milwaukee one. There's been no one interacts with the sites. The whole community website version of things is just dead. I don't want to spend time on it. No one's interacting with it. I don't have any effort there. So I think I would spend about $10 on just investing back into a community and starting to figure out how do I revamp the site to make it more engaging for users, right? Make it easier for, like, I'm a leader on my group. It's very difficult to get a meeting, like a meetup. So I use Meetup to run my user group, but it's very difficult to get that on the actual Power BI page. And there's very little tie-in between like the community sites and like the forums, and like the whole experience just feels very disjointed. Like, we have communities and user groups, but then we have like the technical forum, and for whatever reason, the technical forum is just okay for me right now. I don't know, how often, Tommy, do you go into like the technical forum? Yeah. I mean, I use it, but like it's kind of hard to read, honestly. If I go, I'm finding I'm going to Reddit more and more for help on things.
You mean the tried and true community.power BI?
Yeah. Community.powerbi.com. Like when you go
Man,
there, and
there's
there's
a
like
lot there, man.
there's a lot of content there, and you can search for it. It finds it on Google, okay. But like, I don't really like the experience of it. I mean, I want it to feel more like Reddit, honestly. And again, I'll be very honest. Reddit is very sarcastic. There's a lot of people in there that I'm not sure. Like, you guys are a little bit mean sometimes on Reddit, um, but I like the Reddit's ability to like upvote things and find solutions, and so I feel like I spend a bit more time on there. And the way the information is packed, it's a little bit more condensed and easier to read. I feel like some of the community stuff is just harder to sift through and find answers, in my opinion. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I mean, honestly, I've been using that community.power BI for so long that it's never bothered me too much. I know you're a big Reddit guy, and I think some people are either really in love with Reddit and how it works, and some people just, it doesn't connect.
Well, I think it's more like either some people have used Reddit and they love it. The other people who don't love it haven't used it enough yet to love it.
I'm going to table that conversation because we could talk about that offline, because I have tried. My best friend in the world told me how much I would love Reddit, and
I think it's funny. It's funny stuff on there, but also I think it's just how the forums work, just how the UI is laid out in a way that I can understand the conversations. It seems to be like there can be like little sub conversations on a single question or comment there, which I kind of like. I kind of like being able to find the thing. So I feel like the information is fairly discoverable on Reddit. All I'm trying to say is like the Power BI community, not as discoverable, and we're having a hard time getting communities going. Communities just aren't easy for a leader to run the community. And so, what would I do as Microsoft? I would really kind of hone in and say, what can we do to like really engage the communities? I don't know how you do this, but tell me, when was the last time you went to a conference in the US run by community users? Like,
I was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
this is my point, right? The whole idea of communities is kind of like start organizing live events with people in areas. Like even if it's just $10 that I'm giving here to the community part, right? It's also me just kind of pushing out content to the community and helping, like, let's help people run a conference. Like you're having a local conference in Milwaukee. Let's have a local conference in Chicago. Let's start emphasizing like people getting together and doing like many little mini cons. And like, I go to Europe. I've been to Europe in the last couple of years. Almost every year I've been going to Europe for a speaking engagement. They're running conferences all the time, and it's from their user groups. Their user groups are like 1,000 members large, and then they're putting on conferences that are like 1,500 to 2,000 people show up and stuff. So that's amazing. Like, why don't we have that in America? Like, that's something I really would like to borrow from that team.
Honestly, I also have a community thing too, and I agree too, because I think we're definitely at the stage now where if I'm kind of leading this and I want my, the community to really help drive a lot of it, like it has, I think that forum site, especially for the user groups, we need some upgrades and we need some features.
Yes.
Like, especially with everything virtual now, rather than just, hey, I can blog and write markdown on the site as a user group leader.
Yeah.
Really like what Meetup is right now. But I think even more for doing video calls on there kind of thing from user group leaders to actually meet with everyone or a quick call. Have all these things that are in a sense readily available, but build it into that environment just on community.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with that. Update with the latest and greatest, but make it more than just a forum.
Yes. And I don't know how you do this when, me as a content creator, I really want to highlight the work that I'm doing, right? How can I get my content out in front of more people? I don't really feel like the community is able to do that very well. There's a lot of voices in the community, which are great. And, where can I go to a single spot and just follow my favorite creator and find all the things that they're doing across all social media and all platforms? There's really nothing out there that does that at this point. So anyways, maybe that's an area that I should just figure out how to do it and just solve it myself. Maybe Tips Press should go out and solve that community piece for the community.
Well, you need that $100 though, because we know it is not easy to do.
Yeah, you got to actively invest in it for sure, 100%. All right, that's
so how much did you put in that?
I put $10. So far, I'm at $20 spent so far.
Okay. Oh, And oh wow,
You spent a lot more, Tommy.
I got $50 spent. So
Okay.
I'm gonna go with my heaviest hitter, and then the other ones will kind of let us land. But the one I'm putting $35 down. So
Whoa! This better be amazing.
yeah,
This
yeah,
better
yeah,
be.
yeah.
This better be for pure Power BI. This
And,
better be. This better not be a Fabric thing.
one would say that I had some help today because some inspiration from your shirt. But I wrote this down beforehand. So
My shirt does say Copilot told me to say it. That is what I'm wearing now.
and Copilot told Microsoft that we need a readily available per user for certain functions, not a Copilot license, not a Copilot per user, but if a Copilot for help navigating, just a LLM Copilot that's already available in Microsoft.
It's interesting, Tommy.
So,
but why not Copilot per user?
because sure, we can absolutely try to do that. But the reason why is because I want this adoption, right? And all this navigating. The Copilot that you can have with, if you already have a Fabric SKU, is all just about, hey, I want to write code.
Sure.
Just like, I'm trying to do this. It doesn't have to look at my data or a data frame or records or,
Sure.
The semantic model. It's just literally understanding, here's my script in front of me. Okay. So again, you can download 25 products in the next hour that do this for free right now, and they do it well. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I see you're saying something. It's an interesting topic. So I'm going to probably move up one of my items here then, because I also had a Copilot kind of enhancement as well. So I'm going to move one of my items up here on my list. Yeah. So Tommy, you're saying a Copilot lower SKU, or you're saying Copilot as a, what are you trying?
It's a Copilot for everyone kind of thing. Right. So like, how do I create a tag? How do, where do I navigate to find X? Hey, I'm in a notebook. How do I convert a data frame to a Spark table?
Is your Copilot going to be usable for Power BI Pro users, or is it only going to be Fabric users?
Just Fabric. No, it's only Fabric.
Okay. See, but I understand your sentiment. I'm going to probably do the same here, Tommy. I'm going to probably pick up one of my items. I'm going to also I'm going to throw a large amount of money at this. I'm going to throw $30 at Copilot as well. This is one of my larger investments that I would make. I mean, Microsoft's talking about it, right? And to be honest, I've seen Copilot or AI, large language models, be effective in other areas. I just don't see it being effective in the Power BI space as well either. So where do I think Copilot fits? I think Microsoft's doing a good job kind of incorporating Copilot and like, hey, you're in desktop and you can use Copilot to write descriptions of columns, descriptions of measures. But I think in here, I want to add a little bit of flavor to this one. I want the ability to pre-prompt the Copilot on things. Like, I don't want to overwhelm the users, so I want to give like some pre-prompting, like, hey, here's the pre-prompt I'm going to use to help you build a table or measure description, but you can edit it, Michael. Like, hey, here's what I'm going to start with. You can change that. Hey, as a business user that does XYZ things, here's the pre-prompt. Make this very human readable. And I'd also like the Copilot to say, for example, let's say I'm writing a column or a measure description. Why can't I tell Copilot to, okay, write a description of this measure. The output format should be in this format. Grab the formula of the measure and format it and put it inside the measure description so that the formula is there. So have, first two lines, make two sentences about describing this measure, add the formula from the measure here, and then at the end, write, last updated date on this date time and when it was modified, or something along those lines, but a more enriched version, because that way when I use Copilot later on to go ask about things about the model, it'll have more context around what it's looking for. So yeah, I'm with you, Tommy there. I think I would like to have Power BI, a Copilot all the way down to Power BI Pro level, honestly. I think Copilot should be more. Yeah. So I may be also thinking Copilot per user, I think is what I'm thinking as well.
Copilot per user. So you would still make it a license based?
I mean, I already have Copilot for like my Office and my Excel. Like, I've already paid for it other places. Why can't I just pick various users to use them and put Copilot towards those users? I think that would be effective. I think that would help out some of my creators. And that way, me as a company, I could decide, hey, I could basically adjust, find who's using PowerBI.com the most and only give the heavy users or heavy developers the Copilot to speed them up, right? I don't know if this is also a feature here too, Tommy, but it might be a nice feature to actually add my own Copilot. Like, what if DeepSeek does a good job writing DAX? What if ChatGPT, O3 Mini does a good job writing what I want? Like, I can't use those things, incorporate them into the tools that we have now.
Interesting.
So there might be another opportunity here. Is like, well, yes, we have Copilot. I don't think Microsoft would ever do this, but I would like to see other Copilots being used in the platform as well.
Yeah, so I think that additional integration, I don't even think you have to spend a lot to even get that started. So from a budget point of view, but no, I think regardless what we're both saying here is the need for some type of um, fabric integration for everyone is just essential, and it is just we've talked about this a ton.
Yeah.
And even if it's not the hardest thing to implement, and it's not a lofty goal, it's just this is the world we live in now. So I completely agree.
Okay. Moving on to your next item, Tommy.
All right. Oh, so I guess we kind of put that one together. All right. So I do have a community one. I only put $5 on it.
Okay.
This was very similar to you, where we just have to some outreach, some working. I know how fast things are running in my day to day running Fabric, but we spotlight people on the blog. But how do we make sure we get the right feedback? Because we're running 20 different products right now. So
Yes.
how can we organize this?
Yeah. So maybe some even central organizing from Microsoft and saying, look, we're going to do this event. We need volunteers to help us produce this, but like dedicating someone to like try to put events in cities and lead a little bit of that effort from Microsoft's side. I think would be, yeah, I agree with you. The community I think needs a little bit more love now. I think people are looking for community other places at this point.
No, I completely agree. So I only had $5, but my last one, because we are almost close to time, is I only did 15 is all I had left, but I'm considering allocating it differently. But the rest of my time is focused on the One Lake catalog, but it's going to be that governance section on not just the monitoring and governing those kind of global things like, hey, how many tags you have in domains,
Sure.
but to make it custom for an admin or a team to actually go in and actually go through a series of steps of prompts on what they want to monitor, what are their thresholds, so and what's important to them. And obviously, this would be a lot of work because everyone's custom, but some organizations, they may not care about tags or domains, but other ones, the refresh schedule is huge for them. So really allowing individual teams to go in and actually customize the One Lake catalog to actually highlight what's important to them.
Okay. Interesting. All right. I'm going to, I know, is that your last one, Tommy?
That is my last one. So does that sound like a hard thing to do? Does that sound like something that's not going to be used?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you're replacing a lot of functionality that already exists in like Purview, which I think Purview does some of these things. But I would also argue Purview hasn't been a really good launch for Power BI. It doesn't feel like it's a good fit. It just has always felt like a very weird bolt-on on things. And so I like One Lake Catalog a lot more. It feels a lot more fluid. It seems to fit the program a lot better. And I think this is like the Power BI or Microsoft way of like, this is the Fabric and Power BI lens of like, how do we handle lineage? How do we handle information in tables? And I like One Lake Catalog a lot better. I think the challenge I wish we could solve a little bit better here, and again, Tommy, I think I'd agree with you, is how do we make our data discoverable? And I actually have an item on my list here that is, I also want, with that, Tommy, with One Lake integration, I want table statistics. I want to be able to add rules to a table to tell me if it's adhering to my principles, right? And it needs to be kind of built into the product, right? There's also this thing called, have you heard of the concept of like data drift?
Yeah.
So data drift is, I think this is concept of like, you create a table day one, and then over time it loads up with more information, and you can see the data changing every time you load it. It starts, the data itself starts to change over time, because that's what it does. I mean, you're adding new information, potentially you're updating old records, maybe you get more nulls in that you weren't expecting, or so the data itself kind of has this natural drift to itself. I'd like to identify a way of like starting to spend some time or effort like automating data table quality, table statistics, and data drift. Like those are things I think that should be part of the OneLake catalog that would help me as a developer. And I'm going to put $10 towards that. I think I'm going to put $10 towards that kind of experience. I think, Tommy, that's very close to what you were saying, the governance, that kind of piece of it as well. Okay. We don't have much time left. We've got a couple of minutes left here. So I'm going to burn through some of my other features here and things that I would spend some money on. This is maybe just an effort here. So if I think about my main audience of people that are coming from Power BI and introducing them to Fabric, I feel like there's this common story, and maybe this is already mirroring, and maybe I'm just not using it correctly. So this feature could already exist. Maybe I'm spending money on marketing to let people know this feature exists and how great it is. But there is this feature called open mirroring, and I'd really like to spend more money. So I'm putting $25 down to just a better loading data experience. Right. So let me give you some more context here. A better loading data experience, something like whether I've defined it with a notebook, whether I've defined it with, Dataflows Gen 2 or whatever the thing is. I want the system to kind of be a bit more aware of, hey, I'm loading this data in. These are the transformations that I want. And I want to be able to really focus on how easy it is to either full load a table or incrementally load a table, right? So I think, define a key or these key columns that define uniqueness and to say, these are my keys. Every day, I'm going to give you a partial or a full load of information, and I'll give you a timestamp of when the data is. Just figure it out. Just make it work. So, it's kind of like the idea, like I feel like incremental refresh in Dataflows Gen 2 is not right. There's not a lot of things there. I don't use it. It doesn't write to lake houses. It's not helpful. So that feature, in my opinion, totally missed its initial release. It doesn't help me at all. Mirroring seems really interesting. Copy job seems really interesting, but I don't even know if I can run a copy job from the pipeline yet. So like I kind of want like copy job first or open mirroring. These are features that I need the pipeline to be able to trigger. And then once they run, then I can run like other like notebooks or things that transform data downstream. So what I'm thinking more about like, I want more of a streaming process, right? I don't want real-time analytics. That's not really helpful for me, but I want to be able to stream the data in and have the system kind of be aware of, I'm bringing data into the system. It knows what records are changing, and automatically it's either updating or inserting or deleting. I can't tell you how hard it is to handle deletes. Deletes has been very difficult. So I don't really know there needs to be a better way of identifying when deletes are occurring in the system to keep things in sync. So that's my challenge. I spend a lot of time, mentally, effort around loading data. Is it a full load? Is it incremental? And how do I handle deletes? So make that story for me easier to digest. Does that make sense, Tommy?
Yeah, I mean that kind of goes with, to me, my one about the lineage, where because right, so we're still dealing with the metadata here. I completely agree, because again, so often, when we're dealing with all the different services, like, okay, I know I have my nomenclature, I've written everything down, I've gone through this, but at what point did this get modified? Because I think we're also kind of used to looking in a single product, either whether it's just a single semantic model or code, or if you're a developer where you're kind of in a repository. We still don't have this concept right now where things just refresh and I don't really have that records and that additional logging. It's kind of like you're looking for good logs too, just logs that I can easily access.
Yes, exactly. So anyways, just another note there as well. Okay, very cool. All right, I have two more here and then I'll kind of wrap here. I'm going to go quick. Dataflows Gen 2, too expensive to run. I think you have 30 million users in Power BI and they're coming over to Fabric slightly or a little bit. Every time I see a Power BI user coming to Fabric, the first thing they love to go grab is Dataflows Gen 2, right? We know it works. We know how the UI is comfortable. It's just too expensive to run. I just saw someone do a blog post about it. Maybe this is getting better right now, but Dataflows Gen 2 to load a table from on-prem, he did the numbers. Dataflow Gen 2 was whatever, 2,000 CUs to run. Dataflows Gen 1 was like 1,000, half the cost. And a pipeline activity, a copy activity pipeline was like even less than that, like way less. So, loading data in to the lakehouse or getting things done, the numbers show that using anything else other than Dataflows Gen 2 is cheaper, basically, to load data in. Well, I mean, I realize you can't make everything super cheap, but at least make Dataflows Gen 2 the same price as a Dataflow Gen 1, or maybe even even it was slightly more, right? There's some new UI. It's a little bit easier to work with. It's easier to save and get in and out. Like there's been some improvements to Dataflows Gen 2, but the doggone thing can't be twice the price. That's ridiculous. So make it like 10% more. That makes more sense. Same job, make it about 10%.
Right.
That makes more sense. So something's going wrong there. I'm like, I don't understand. So I was just at a conference, Tommy. Everyone, I probably had about 4 or 5 conversations that I was talking to, and they're like, yeah, we're not using Dataflows Gen 2. We're teaching all of our people to learn Python and notebooks. Everyone is learning Python and notebooks. Yes, I've been saying this for a while on the podcast, and I think was even more evident now because everyone's like, well, we're moving that direction because it's cheaper to run. It's becoming, I think if they don't fix this, you're going to lose a lot of Power BI customers to the notebook experience. And again, I don't know how the internal politics of Microsoft works, but I imagine there's a lot of like internal conflict between the different teams because now you have the same way to load data. Like you still have the same user base, but now the same user base can use many different tools to do their thing. And so now this tool is like, hey, you should use KQL. That's the best tool. No, you should use Dataflows Gen 2. That's the best tool. Or no, now you should use notebooks. That's the best. So now there's like competing teams to do the same work. And like you're now dividing that 30 million monthly active users across multiple teams. And it's probably very difficult to get funding to see which team is growing better in the different areas. So it feels to me like Microsoft has to be very careful here to not make all these tools competing against each other, but to work well with each other.
So this is a really big point that you're making here, because I think the success story of Power BI was Power Query in Excel.
Yeah, correct.
And there's this nice kind of jump. And then this Power BI blog that came out was only, again, all the things that we're dealing with. To your point, Mike, if I check the Fabric blog, there are, it's like, hey, here we're going to quickly create an event house, and it's a step-by-step for someone who's, not the first time someone's walking into this.
Yep.
And you're still dealing with those different personas. It really bugs me about the what that cost difference is, because I know how many tests have already been out there. If you want people to jump to Fabric, you shouldn't have to make them required to learn Python or required to learn Kusto.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was in a sense one of the selling points of Power BI.
Yes.
And the fact that right now it's we're got to figure out. I think I'll pull some of my money in for you to. How do we actually optimize Dataflows Gen 2? Because I still love them. I still use them all the time.
And, if you have a lot of extra compute, if you're not doing heavy jobs, they still seem to do really well. But, they don't seem to scale all the way up to very large jobs. They seem to have a little bit of problem with larger data. So if you're doing really big data, it's a problem. It does a great job pulling things from SharePoint. Like if I could get a notebook to easily pull things from SharePoint, that's one more thing. I'm like, I don't really need to use Dataflows Gen 2. Anyways, let me get my last one in here. So that was Dataflows Gen 2. And last one here, this is a very dev-centric way. I feel like there's a trend in the market with like third-party applications. This is like whatever, any company that's building things nowadays, there feels like there's this movement towards webhooks. And AP. So, Tommy, to your first design of the whole system here, more support for APIs, right? More real-time eventing, right? Set up a webhook. I really think I'm actually very convinced here. I think webhooks and the API era is still growing quickly. If you build an application and you don't have some sort of webhook that you can subscribe to, it feels like you're not building the right software. So I feel like, in general, when I look across the landscape of like companies building software and programs, there's always some kind of solution that has a webhook attached to it. They're everywhere. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Microsoft make it a little bit easier for me to tap Fabric into webhooks of different systems. Okay, imagine this. Let me just give you a scenario. What I mean by webhooks, right? Let's think about, I have a customer relationship management system. Like maybe it's Salesforce, maybe it's some other homegrown solution, maybe it's some third party that's not quite as big as a Salesforce, right? When you change a record or have a user input piece of data, sometimes those software pieces can then, a new customer has been updated in the system. Send a message to this URL that this is an update on the record. Here's the update. Here's the update. So these systems now are collecting data, but they're able to like push little tiny messages out that says, here's the message of this thing. As I look at that, as you're updating your user table in this third-party app, I want Power BI to easily absorb those messages. And I need it to be like a dial, right? How fast do I want this data to be updated, right? I'm talking maybe this is kind of real-time analytics, but like as these messages come over to Power BI, I need an easy way to catch the message, put it in the lakehouse, and then queue those messages up until I'm ready to process them, and then process them all in batch. So this is kind of like Data Activator to some degree. There's a little bit of things there you can do on Data Activator, but right now the whole experience seems like very disjointed. There's a lot of little nuggets and pieces, and you really got to know like how to design the system to make it work. I feel like there should be an easier, simpler method to just turn it on. So I'm going to spend $5 just kind of making that experience more seamless, easier to use, easier to digest. So that's my webhook for third-party apps. So I'm going to just kind of improve that process, spend $5 there. It's probably a little bit of use of real-time analytics, maybe some streaming. Maybe it uses a little bit of Custo in there. I don't know what it does, but I think this solution kind of runs across many different products. So we'll see.
And to your point, Mike, right now the primary way that they're kind of doing that is in the SQL databases to create an API for the GraphQL, which is not kind of like the universal language. So,
but that's not a webhook. That doesn't.
I know, but it's a user interface to actually start creating that right now, and I think that's weird.
It's not. GraphQL is not webhooks.
No, I'm not saying it's a webhook. What I'm saying, to touch the API right now, if you want to use the user interface in Microsoft Fabric, that's really the only way where you can actually generate that. To your point, you want to be able to set up the configuration in Fabric.
Yes.
Yeah.
So John Kursky is on the chat here. John, you're right on point. Thank you for joining, John. But exactly spot on, John. I want that kind of functionality. That is a user data function, which comes from Fabric. I think they've announced them. I'm not sure if they're out in public preview yet, but user data functions are potentially an opportunity where you write code and it can handle these kind of things. But like, I mean, I like it, but again, what's our audience, right? If I'm a data engineer, fine. User data functions, no problem.
Right.
But I'm not. Like I've got a huge pool of Power BI users that are coming to the product. What do they use? How do we make it easy for them? So to me, there's like another part of this. It's like, yes, but it doesn't quite work the way I want. So I need a little bit more help here for like that business user to get into it. So maybe there's a UI on top of it that like writes a little bit.
Exactly.
Hey, put Copilot in user-defined functions so I can just talk to it and say, hey, write me a user-defined function that takes this information in, process it, write a file, and put it down in the lakehouse. I mean, to me, this is where Copilot should excel. I should be able to interact with the Copilot, and Copilot should say, I'm going to build most of this thing for you, and then once the code's there, then I can tweak it to my satisfaction. Like, this is great because then I could learn with it. So maybe throw Copilot at user data functions. That might be where we need things to go. Great, take $30 from my Copilot per user and put it there. I don't know. Anyways, and I agree, John. Logic apps are way better for the user interface. A Logic app does the same thing essentially, and I do like the UI of Logic apps. They're maybe a bit more expensive to run, but like, man, that graphical interface of like, do this, do that, grab these data points, grab these up. That's way better for me. Yeah, I agree. That works really well for me. All right. I think we've exhausted this episode. We really went hard and long on this episode. Just so many topics, so many things we'd spend our time on. Regardless, though, these are all just ideas. I will say I absolutely love the Fabric and Power BI product. So even though we're playing If I Was Arun at this point, Arun, thank you very much. If you are listening to this
I don't want the job.
I don't want the job. You've got a really hard job on top of this. The team in your building is really very well done. You're doing a great job on the product. I'm very excited to get to Fabric Conference and see more of like the new things that are coming out. And there's going to be more roadmap kind of probably coming out and more announcements coming out as well. So we're very excited to hear that as well. I'm looking forward to meeting with the community there and enjoying all the other experiences and learning from other people. That being said, let's wrap this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. I know your time is valuable. We do appreciate you listening to our podcast. If you don't mind, if you like this episode, if there are features here that you like, let us know in the comments. Chat to us, and we'll, Tommy and I kind of watch these videos, and we'll respond to your comments down below in the comments thread on the video. Please do that. If you thought this was valuable, share it with somebody else. Let them know you also found this episode was fun and engaging. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Share with a friend since, well, we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.slash-podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Central and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.